From Buffalo Toronto Public Media and WBFO, this is What's Next, Producer's Picks, highlights of conversations heard on previous episodes. On today's show.
And that's what you want to see in young men, is that them applying some of the concepts and skills that they've learned.
Daniel Robertson, Director of the Boys and Young Men of Color Initiative at Say Yes Buffalo. And we close out with...
There's really been a need for what we are calling non-traditional supports. And I hesitate in using that term non-traditional because for many of us, people of color, a lot of things that help us, they're very indigenous and they've been helping people of color. Right. If you go back hundreds of years, it's just not traditional in the context of what we have here.
Kelly Dumas of Healing Hub of New York Incorporated and Amanda Paul of Say Yes Buffalo. I'm Thomas O'Neill White. Thanks for listening. First, we revisit my conversation with Daniel Robertson, Director of the Boys and Young Men of Color Initiative at Say Yes Buffalo. We discuss his plans for his new role and the positive examples of leadership that helped him step up. Let's talk about this new role. You're taking over for Tommy McClam as Director for Boys and Young Men of Color Initiative. Some pretty big shoes to fill.
Definitely huge. Big shout out to Tommy McClam, my guy. Actually called me and sent me the voicemail today, so I'm waiting for a call back. But, man, I've been about almost 6 months now in the role. It doesn't really feel any different than, what the work was before, because we've been at this now for 5-6 years, and the goal initially when I came in was for, if I wanted to move into this role of leadership as a director of our Boys and Men of Color Initiative, it would be there for me. And we kind of attacked the work with that framework and that kind of state of mind from the beginning. So Tommy's been training me up for this for years, so it didn't really feel like a major lift, just a little bit more responsibility.
Right. So what advice did he leave you with? Any words of encouragement? I know you guys, when I first met you guys, it was can't have one without the other.
Right.
What was some advice he gave to you?
Really just, man, keep my head down, do the work. One of the things that he's always said to me that I carry with me daily is just never get to a point where you start to smell your own press. Right. Stay humble in the work, and just remember that at the end of the day, the work is really about trying to prepare these young men to be better leaders, to be men in the community, to be the future mentors that we know that the young people that are coming behind them are going to need. So it's really just, staying grounded in the work and keeping the main thing.
What does community mean to you?
For me, it's right now in this day and age that we're in, it's about bringing back the community that we used to have. So you always hear that term, it takes a village.
Right. And
it seems like over the years that village has become less of a village. So it's really about kind of repairing and reconnecting the disconnect that appears we have between school, community, and home, right? So, bringing those bridges back together so that our community can truly thrive in the manner that it once was, especially when you talk about, everything that's going on and taking place on the east side of Buffalo.
Right. Why do you think the disconnect exists right now, or has existed for some years?
I would say just shift in the landscape of just, you take what happened to us a couple of years when we were kind of just forced to pause and slow down because of COVID. Right. And then coming out of that, and even during COVID, you had some of the racial uprisings and just some of the systemic barriers that we've continued to try to overcome over the years. Just the busyness that we have in people's lives, parents working 2 or 3 jobs, schools being forced to try to do a lot more than what they've done in years past. We need, more parents being involved in the schools, that buy-in both ways, accountability on parents and the school system, but also community as well. There are opportunities for different sectors to get involved, and we got to continue to push the envelope and make sure that those people do their part. We all have a role to play, and it's important that we just get back to that point and understanding that.
That's certainly like a Tommyism, because I remember the first conversation I had, he talked about, well, the city and the area is too siloed. Everybody wants the same thing, it seems, but there's people over here, and there's people over here, and there's people over here, and they're not talking to each other.
Right.
Is that something that you look to bridging those gaps a little bit? Definitely.
I think the role that I play and also just Say Yes is a nonprofit that's been doing a lot of positive and influential, impactful work over just the short 11, almost 12 years that we've been in community is being that connector, that bridge builder, that organization that is really willing and able to go out and work with different individuals and organizations and partner to ensure that parents and students and our district are getting some of the things that we know that they need. So we definitely play a huge role in that. I see myself as, especially now in this role, as someone that's trying to kind of bridge the gap between the OGs and our younger, population of young men that we're working with. It's funny because, I always see Tommy as the OG, and now the young men are kind of looking at me as the OG, and I'm like, I'm not even 40 yet. Like, wait a minute. Like, I'm still Unc and Big Bro. Like, don't give me the Tommy title yet, man. So just really trying to be that connector and be a example that young men can follow, but don't aim to be like Mr. Daniel. Go beyond, Mr. Daniel. So.
But 40's around the corner for you, though, right?
Man, we're not going to talk about how close 40 is or may not be, all right?
I'm coming up on 41, so
no, it's a beautiful time, though, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. What has changed or what has grown over the years for breaking barriers for boys and young men of color?
Man, it's been 6 years, right? So to think about where we started when, in a room with young people and some of the elders and kind of older gentlemen, more seasoned gentlemen that are a part of our community, and sitting in the room and saying that we're going to build this program from scratch, from what the colors and the logo are to where we meet, how often we meet, to what are these programmatic elements going to look like, and have young voices in the room actually doing that. It's rare that you see that. So to see where we are now, a couple graduating classes, embarking on a couple different initiatives. We have the Breaking Barriers Youth Sport Management Leadership Academy that has kicked off with our program supervisor / manager, Jamie and Uzi, who's doing a phenomenal job leading that work, where we start to teach young men about the other side of sports, right? So often our young men are so focused on, I'm going to the NBA.
Right.
I'm going to the NFL. And you never want to be a dream killer, right? You want young men to have these aspirations, but we also want them to be realistic at the same time. If you're not up 4:30, 5:30 in the morning, and you have a coach or a trainer that you're working with day in and day out, and you're putting the right things in your body, and you understand the level of energy and the grind that it takes to actually elevate to that level, right? Chances are you won't ascend to that level. Maybe you'll make it and be a college ball player, play D1, D2, D3, but there's a plethora of other opportunities involved in sports.
Yeah, within that sports framework, there's so much to do.
Exactly. We use LeBron as an example, right? Now, I love everything that LeBron does off the court. Not the biggest fan of him on the court.
You know what? Charles should be interviewing you right now.
Yeah, because Kobe was my guy. Charles knows that. Kobe was definitely my guy, still is my guy. But LeBron is a perfect example of, you look at everything he's doing off the basketball court, but for him to, he's on record, I spend $1 million a year on my body, right? But think about everything that goes into that. You probably have a nutritionist, a chef, and they're not the same thing, although they could have both of those skill sets, right?
Right.
You might have a physical therapist. You may have a physical trainer. You may have, people that are monitoring just, I don't know, certain things.
You could even have a psychologist.
Right, a psychologist. You have a number of people that are looking at you from a mind, body, spirit, just physical, everything.
Right.
You look at Rich Paul, right? Just put out a book, agent, several different clients. These are not necessarily fields and careers that our young men think about when they think about sports, right? So we're trying to expose them to those different opportunities and also encourage them to go into coaching and becoming referees, because those are opportunities in sports, right? So I love the referee part, because one of the things with Kobe is that he would, study the refs.
Yes.
He would study the rule book. So he's like, if I see a ref is positioned over here, I know I could get away with a tug on a jersey over here. So as an athlete, it's to your advantage to kind of learn the tricks of the trades of being a referee, because it can help you in your game. Kobe showed us that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you doing things differently now that you are in this position? You said, yeah, I got a little more, leadership, I got a little more on my plate. Are you doing things a little different from what Tommy did, or are you still kind of growing into the position?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's growth within myself and just understanding that there's a different level of responsibility that I now have, as well as maybe not so much different, but adding, kind of putting my own kind of twist and my own energy staple on it, right? Because it was handed off to me, right?
Yeah.
And the goal there is always to take it from where it was to another level, right? So I think, with different individuals, different skill sets, different backgrounds, some different passions, naturally you have some differences from what it was to, what you're aspiring it to be. And I think Tommy would be the first one to say that, I want you to take it and run with it and, take it to a level that I couldn't. And I think he empowered me to do that. So
there's one thing he does, it's empower people.
Definitely.
So talk to me about fostering leadership qualities in these young men. Every time I see these guys, it's like, wow, they're smart, they're funny, they're well-read, they're kids, but they've got such good heads on their shoulders. I'm always impressed by that. Talk to me about bringing leadership qualities to these young men.
I think about that at the end of the day, when you look at just some of the young men that I know you've had a chance to kind of sit down with and talk to, the Dorian Withrows, who's now, I think Dorian's he might be working on his third book. I know he has 2 out there, right? For him to go from a point where in school, working, now writing books. You got Malik Stubbs, who I've worked with over a number of years from when he was, I think, an intern over at City Hall, and he interned with us, myself and Tommy, around the time that we were starting to get Breaking Berries off the ground, to him being so involved and wrapped up in community and caring so much about it, to Jamian, who's come up through the Leadership Council and now is, essentially helping to run our BMOC initiative, right? You see these just natural progressions, and that's what you want to see in young men, is that them applying some of the concepts and skills that they've learned, especially when you talk about fostering community and being so entrenched and involved, but them doing it in their own way, them finding their own niche to contribute as a positive individual human being in society.
Right, and I think also the accountability within the group. Everyone is accountable for each other. Somebody talks out of turn. No. We're going to let this person who was speaking continue to speak. You can speak next. Stuff like that. I'm always impressed by that.
Yeah, you try to build these certain skill sets into young men, and everything doesn't click right away, right? You may, pour into a young man for years, and you're just waiting for the light bulb to go on. But a couple years down the line, you may cross paths, and it's like, okay, all right, you said something to me. It made me think about, something I tried to pour into you before, and now because of what you just said to me, I know somewhere something clicked.
Yeah.
Right. And when you start to see that, you start to see the light bulbs go on. That's, that's what it's all about for me. I think the key here is when you start to see young men that have gone through the program and now they become the mentors in community. That's
Right.
when you know it worked, right? Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do. Like, we want you to learn some stuff, right? We want you to be successful, find your passion and your purpose in life. But when it comes full circle and now you're doing what someone else did for you, that's what it's about.
I think when we first met, I was working on a story about changing the narrative around perceptions of young black and brown men. But given the allure of what they see on TV or through social media, just these negative stereotypes, is it challenging at times to keep them focused on what they're doing, on their tasks?
I would say extremely. When you think about it, for me, when I look at this work, it's about touch points, right? How much impact can you have within those touch points? And I mean, the more touch points that you have with a person, the more influence that I think you can have. And our phones, laptops, just being able to have basically the world at your fingertips can be a huge detriment sometimes for young people especially. They can get so absorbed in what they see on social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, that it feels like you're constantly battling what they might be hearing in rap lyrics versus what they're seeing on the YouTubes and social media. So it's almost this always constant battle. So in a way, you have to find that niche between utilizing the devices and avenues in which they communicate to communicate on their level and get your messaging in there at the same time.
Yeah, it's a far cry from how we grew up, where it was just like
God.
BET and MTV. That's what you got, and that was it.
Yeah.
Your Barbershop Talk series, what's the focus of the series?
So the Barbershop Talk series kind of has evolved out of the work that myself and Antoine Johnson over at Buffalo Perinatal Prenatal Network have been doing over the course of a couple of years together. So the Breaking Beers Retreat, we've collabed on those, and we had an opportunity to put in a proposal for a grant through the Office of Mental Health and their Reimagine I Am a Change.
Is this through the county?
Office of Mental Health, so state, federal dollars, right? And this is kind of like a non-traditional approach to mental health. So really something that's kind of unprecedented. Big shout out to Dr. Jennifer Lewis Johnson, who's spearheading that effort here in Buffalo, New York, and allowing us kind of the flexibility to do some things that are a little bit out of the box. So the premise of the Barbershop Talk series and our mental health wellness initiative in general is to create these brave and safe spaces for men to come together, build, bond, connect around the topic of mental health, right? So the Barbershop Talk series is just that. We decided that, hey, let's get in contact with some barbershop owners and say, hey, we want to bring these types of conversations into your barbershop. And I think you can attest to this. The barbershop is a place where we normally would just come together, connect, and just talk the talk anyway, and really kind of serves as a community space for mentorship, right? So, I mean, we have conversations in barbershop. Why not bring this into that arena as well in regards to mental health? And it's something that's important, especially when you talk about black and brown boys.
Right. So the focus of the series is mental health. Now, do you, from episode to episode, is it like different facets of mental health? Talk to me about the last one you did.
So the last one we actually talked about, the premise was really, what are some things that you all, men in this space, are doing to ensure that you're in a good space mentally, right? So we talked about everything from exercise to yoga to meditation to making sure that you're putting the right foods in your body, making sure that you're getting enough sleep, making sure that you have someone, a go-to person, a mentor, somebody that you can talk to. And if it rises to a level above that you seriously think and consider seeking some help from a mental health professional, someone that can help you kind of just navigate all the things that comes with life, especially when you talk about being a black man, right? Growing up in Buffalo, growing up in America, and everything that we oftentimes have on our shoulders that we just don't open up and talk about. And the week before that, we talked about depression, and we talked about stress, right? And where those things tend to manifest themselves and come from, and how you go about dealing with those things.
Lively conversations?
Oh, definitely, man. It's grown. We just finished up the third session. It's grown each week. It's just building momentum. It's to the point now where people are kind of like, can you guys continue this? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we're going to explore, maybe not, on a week-to-week basis, but maybe, twice a month, maybe once a month, just in these spaces where men can come together. And it's lovely when you see men in a space being open and vulnerable, talking about things that are impacting them.
How did you talk, speaking of mental health, how did you talk to your guys following 514? A lot of tough conversations? Yeah,
a little bit. I mean, it feels like it's still fresh in the minds of a lot of individuals. Mm-hmm. I have to speak for myself, with the Say Yes, our administrative office being, right down the street on Jefferson. Yep. Is, every time you ride by it, you think about it, right? So we definitely had conversations around it. One of the things that happened during that time is that some of our young men were actually being trained to be through Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition to be Healing Circle Restorative Justice Circle trainers. So after 514, our young men started going out into the community and hosting circles so that people could talk about their feelings and reactions to 514. And I think through that, it helped them because while doing that, in the midst of that, they're helping others to kind of process their emotions and just talk through a very tough time.
And they were taking that leadership role themselves?
All right. Yep. Definitely taking that leadership role. It was something that anytime we have an inkling or an idea, we'll sit down and, talk about it with the young men. And they were excited about it. Several of them signed up. They took it and ran with it. But the beautiful thing about that is now they have a skill set that they can use and potentially, generate your own income from it. That's one of the things within Breaking Barriers. We're always trying to teach those young men to find those legal hustles, as Tommy would say.
And they were also featured on NBC?
Yeah, featured on NBC. A couple months after that, when they came in to kind of do just check in on community and see how community has responded to that. So it was nice for those young men to be, recognized for the work that they've been doing and engaged in the community.
Where do you see Boys and Young Men of Color, the initiative, in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, as Tommy would say, if Daniel's still here doing this in 5 to 10 years, then I haven't done my job because I'm now tasked with ensuring that, I pour into, a young person that may want to take this and run with it after, I'll get to that point where it's time to kind of not so much, it won't be hanging it up for me like Tommy did. It'll be transitioning into whatever that next thing is for me, right? So that would be one of the major goals that I would have ahead of me is exactly what Tommy did for me is doing it for somebody else. The other thing is that while I'm in this role and have this opportunity is to build and expand Breaking Barriers, right? One of our key goals this year and next year is to expand into the Buffalo Public Schools and be working with more administrators and students in some of the school buildings that we just know could benefit from, this initiative along with the My Brother's Keeper work that they're already doing in the schools.
Now, what would that look like if you're coming into the schools and work? Is that like an after-school program? Is that like a Saturday morning kind of thing?
So right now, we're in the school buildings on Saturdays due to the partnership with the community schools, right? So we operate on the Saturdays that they host at Bennett. We also have a partnership with one of the charter schools, and we're working at one of the Buffalo Public Schools. And what that looks like is we come in during the school day and we run session. So we run the young men through our 30-lesson curriculum that was developed by Dr. Fatima Morale over at Buffalo Public Schools. But the curriculum, the topics the input all came from the young men. So we sat down with them years ago. What do you guys want to? What should we talk about? What do you guys want to learn about? What interests you all? They gave us some topics. We started to build out the curriculum, and now that's what we utilize when we go into the school buildings. Along with, if there's something current that's going on in the world that's impacting our community, we bring that into the mix as well.
What are some of the topics that were originally brought up?
So one of the big ones is, and we always tend to lead with this is always probably within the first 2 to 3 sessions, it's talking about passion and purpose, right? Because once a young man kind of understands what they like, what they love, those things that make them kind of tick, the things that you may think about that keep you up at night in a good way, you start to unlock what that passion is, right? And then that helps to define what your purpose is in life. So we find that we like to kind of have that conversation along with helping young men to understand who they are as a person and what they bring to the world, right? So those are always influential. Right. When you start to have those initial conversations, you sit down and just building relationships with young men.
What's next for you and the Boys and Young Men of Color Initiative heading into the new year?
New year, again, expansion, building, breaking barriers up, continuing to expand into more schools. Building up a team, because right now we are a team of 2, myself and Jamian, and before it was myself and Tommy and those collection of young men. So continuing to build out the team so that we can have a broader impact, continuing to uplift the voices of young men through our podcast, the Breaking Barriers podcast, continuing to push on issues that tend to impact boys and men of color in a negative way, continuing to build and establish partnerships. I love the partnership that we have with Antoine Johnson and Buffalo Perinatal Prenatal. We have a couple different initiatives that are rolled into that, the work that we're doing with Office of Mental Health, so spearheading that work.
Talk to me about the fitness boot camp.
So big shout out to Gentino Copeland over at G Cope Fitness. He will be leading our young men within Breaking Barriers and also men from community through some boot camp workout sessions that there's a direct line between your mental health and physical health, right? I know when I get up in the morning, if I get up at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning, and I go to the gym, my days are so much smoother, right? Because it feels good when you come from the gym. You're just ready to take on the day. So
I'm more of a nighttime workout guy.
Kudos to you, because going to the gym after work is it's like sardines packed in tin can, man. It's hard because there's so many people in the gym.
Right.
I like to get in, get out, do some supersets, move from machine to machine. I don't like to wait. But it puts me in a very good space when I have some physical exercise and activity, right? So around the physical aspect, Gentino also, he has some young men that he works with and speaks life into. So we're going to get some of that too. There's going to be it's limited. We have 40 slots per session. There's going to be 4 sessions. I'll make sure I get the information over to you, but we got 4 dates set aside for that. We are in the process of trying to put together a winter 1-day retreat out at Holiday Valley, so the young men, fathers, sons will get a chance to go do some snow tubing and skiing out at Holiday Valley, kind of introduction into some physical activity in a sport that men of color don't typically engage in, right?
Yep.
But also have fun in the snow. During the wintertime, you can be cooped up in the house, and that can cause folk to kind of be down and depressed, and as they used to say, kind of isolated, right? So we want to kind of get away from that and engage in just things that expose men as stuff that we just typically don't do, but like I said before, create these spaces where we can come together, build bond naturally, right? And you see relationships come out of that. You're seeing it with the barbershop talks already. There was a young man who was mentioned Tuesday that he was just struggling with some things. And I won't share what those things are, but really struggling, right? but for him to be open in a space where he doesn't know this room full of men, right? That's what it's about. Yeah. And to see men come over to that young man and say, hey, if you need someone to talk to, give me a call. Here's my business card. You want to see those types of things. So through this initiative, we're creating those opportunities for men to do that.
That was Daniel Robertson, director of the Boys and Young Men of Color Initiative at Say Yes Buffalo. And we close today's show with Kelly Dumas of Healing Hub of New York Incorporated and Amanda Paul of Say Yes Buffalo. The two sit with me for a discussion about a new program that empowers mental health clinicians of color. Healing Hub and Say Yes Buffalo has partnered for the Building Clinicians of Color campaign. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about this collaboration?
Absolutely. So probably, I don't know, was it a little while ago, I got a call from Amanda from Say Yes Buffalo that, they were working on this initiative following the Tops massacre. There was a noted need to have more clinicians of color accessible to the community. So she was reaching out to different providers to kind of get some input on how to go about doing that. So I don't know if you want to speak a little to it.
Sure, yeah. After the shooting that took place at Tops, we were approached by a few different funders, United Healthcare being one of the key ones. And they came to us and they said, what can we do? We would like to do what we can to support the community. And they were looking to us to give them some answers. So we naturally looked to the community to hear what they needed. And after everything had taken place and there was a lot of community response, mental health services was widely sought. And the feedback we received was that there were not enough clinicians of color being able to provide services at that point in time and just in general. And so that's when we turned back to the funders and said, this is where we want to put the focus. And initially, the thought process was that we would hire more people, either in Say Yes or look to what we have a lot of partner agencies that provide mental health services. And so we had several planning sessions like Kelly was talking about. Kelly got looped into that. We brought Kelly in, and thankfully for Kelly, she had us take a couple steps back and said, there are a lot of people of color who are providing mental health services, but not necessarily to members in the Buffalo community because there's a lot of barriers that they're up against. And so what can we do differently? And from that point on, it just made natural sense to work with Kelly and the Healing Hub to lead the work.
And so, Kelly, what type of barriers are we talking about here?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, no one knows how many clinicians of color we even have. So the visibility of us is a big barrier. We have a number of private practice, Black-owned run people of color who are, have a full practice of mental health services. We have a number of Black and brown clinicians that are working within clinics, behavioral health clinics, but the awareness. So part of it, so one piece was we need to increase awareness of where the clinicians are. How do you access those services if you're looking specifically for a person of color to provide mental health support? And then a lot of our ones who are providing services to the community, there are barriers to being able to accept insurance. That is quite a feat to tackle, and so that becomes a barrier for many. And many of them don't have the resources available to address that. So those are just a couple of the major ones. And then if we get into at the end of the day, we need more. So we need more coming into the field. And so to address that, we have to go back to whether it's middle school, high school, and start talking to our young people about a career in mental health field and getting people interested. So as they, take their path to professional careers, that's kind of in their mind. So yeah.
Getting back to that first point, how do you raise awareness?
Well, I think that a couple simple ways. It seems simple, but when you lack the resources necessary to do it, most of our Black and brown clinicians who have practices, marketing being able to have a presence, whether that's on social media or just out in they don't have funds to do things like that. So a lot of times you'll hear by word of mouth. If you're lucky, we just have kind of that network that happens where you call someone and say, hey, I'm looking for a Black counselor. Do you know anyone? So being able to have resources to be able to kind of have a locate, and this is part of what we're going to work on too under this initiative, creating a database. So a place where the community can go to kind of look and see, here are clinicians of color, practices of color, mental health providers, and how to access them.
So who are these folks in this cohort? You've got 16 members.
Yes.
Can you talk about their trajectories? Because they're not all at the same level right now.
That's right. Ooh, yes. It's a diverse group of with individual needs. So we have a number of participants who have their own private practice. Some of them currently are looking on how to expand that practice. They have folks who are interested in joining. So we're providing some support, like business support in knowing how do you expand your practice. If I'm an individual clinician and now I want to have folks join me, how do I create that? Some of them are getting support to be able to accept health insurance. We have some clinicians in the cohort who work at behavioral health clinics. And so they're looking to expand their capacity in terms of professional skills, maybe professional training. One was able to complete an anger management, for example, certification. So when people from our communities of color are looking for us, I say us because I'm a clinician of color myself, we also want to make sure we have the various specialties. So some of them are able to access some trainings and workshops to enhance their skills. Several of them are licensed, fully licensed. A number of them are working towards that. So they're getting assistance with study prep. There's a difficult exam to pass. So, and it costs, it's expensive to take the exam and to get study tools. So they're getting support in that way. Having licensed professionals are important, as well as having the paraprofessional. So all of it's important, but the license piece is important because oftentimes as people of color, we are misdiagnosed when we go into spaces because we are being seen by people who may not recognize cultural differences. So this is also helping us to get more licensed professionals of color.
Amanda mentioned earlier that this Clinicians of Color was born and bred out of identifying needs post 514. I know that the top shooter's federal death penalty trial is set for September 2025. It's 20 months from now, and given appeals, it could stretch out longer. Considering all of this, can you speak on the long-term trauma effects on the community as it relates to this program?
Oh, absolutely. The trauma that the community has experienced and will continue to experience impact from, it didn't start at 514.
Right.
So,
Maybe 514 exacerbated
exactly. And so, it exasperated it. It brought it to the forefront. So just like it didn't start then, it's not just going to go away.
Right.
So we have an opportunity to address it, to take a look at it and say, okay, this is an issue that has existed and plagued our community. How do we make improvement on it? The traumatic impacts of this shooting will be far-reaching. So being able to have supports and services available in our communities so that people, when they're feeling like they need to talk to somebody, they need some kind of support. And there are times when it's okay. Maybe I don't feel I have to speak to someone of color, but oftentimes if a person of color feels like I want to speak to a person of color, we need to make sure we have enough supports available and people know how to find them.
Or just having the need to speak to someone, and that someone happens to be a person of color, probably makes it easier for that person to talk and to open up.
Absolutely. And especially if you think about this particular, I mean, we're talking about trauma that comes from a racially driven act. So race is definitely a big issue for people who are healing and still feeling the traumatic impacts of that. So it does help to make sure you have people who look like those who were targeted, so that people can actually come in and not feel like they have to be guarded with what they say, because I don't want to offend, I don't want to upset someone, I don't know if they'll understand why I'm angry, so to be able to come into a space and be free and talk about what's going on and get the help you need.
Is that the overall goal for the program then?
Yes. I mean, the overall goal is to really, really, at the end of the day, have many spaces where our communities can see where they can go, where there are spaces designed for people of color, where they know this is a safe. I was pausing a little with doing that because saying safe space, but basically a safe space, or a space that recognizes, as a person of color, I may come with some unique and different needs. So having lots of those spaces available and people being able to access them.
How are the needs going to be met, and what were the conversations about on how to build this framework?
Yeah. So, when you look at the needs, there can be some unique differences, I think, when we're really looking to provide culturally centered supports. So we want to make sure that besides being a person of color that's providing the support, oftentimes we tend to be more communal. So having spaces that allows for that to happen, oftentimes in our mental health system, and it's just the way it's designed, it's very structured and restrictive, where, it's prescriptive. So you might have 45 minutes, and in these 45 minutes, you have to get about 10 things done. So it doesn't really allow for the time that someone who, one, is coming in with some hesitation because of stigma and all the, so creating those spaces that allows time for people to just come in and not feel rushed or pushed into fitting into an existing structure of how they'll get the support. I'm sorry, I forgot what you asked.
Oh, building the framework.
Oh, yes.
No worries. Yes.
So building the framework, I think it has been and it will continue to be very important to hear the voice of the people in terms of what it is that they need. People, from what we have heard up to now, there's really been a need for what we are calling non-traditional supports. And I hesitate in using that term non-traditional because for many of us, people of color, a lot of things that help us, they're very indigenous and they've been helping people of color. Right. If you go back hundreds of years, it's just not traditional in the context of what we have here in the U.S. and what has been coined as traditional. So being able to come together in a communal way and provide support to each other, that could happen through, again, non-traditional ways. Music, cooking, you don't have to, it's not always about coming and sitting in a chair.
Yes, right.
And going through, so help can look different. And so the framework, I think, has to allow space for those who are seeking the support and services to be able to help frame it. We can't just come in and say, okay, this is what we have and this is what you need. We have to take that time to make sure we're also hearing and pivoting when necessary.
So you could create a cooking class, essentially. or like
yes.
Some sort of musical program.
Absolutely. That's very therapeutic for many people. And oftentimes when you incorporate activities like that, it takes people off the mindset of I'm getting mental health. So you can incorporate those pieces into it, but while we are doing other things. So and we have a number of Black and brown mental health professionals who do that, but then it's about making sure they have the resources available to continue doing that and that the community knows how to access them.
We mentioned Say Yes's role, but there's obviously a lot of other partners involved in this endeavor. Can both of you speak to that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Say Yes. And I think that that's one of the reasons the funders did look to Say Yes. We have a collective impact partnership where we really, if something exists, we don't want to recreate it. We want to uplift, right? And so once we really started getting into the weeds of the structure and how this is going to look, that's when we were also looking at who are we partnering with or who do we need to partner with to make this work happen. And so I know Villa Maria, we approached, joined to, they're really offering up their space to us. And we also talked about long-term goals and how they, as a higher ed institution, can also support this. We mentioned working with students, working, and exposing them to different career paths. So Villa Maria, now we also are pulling in a lot of different partners when it comes to the training and different areas of credentialing. So there's a lot of moving pieces and putting all that together. So
yeah, we have another partner is the Rafiki Consortium that's outside of they're out of Baltimore, but they're providing to the clinicians in the cohort some culturally centered skills training. So we've had indigenous psychotherapy training. This month there's going to be Black family resilience. They're going to do a training on DSM-5 diagnosing from a cultural lens. So they're going to do about 10 trainings with the group. Recovering from racialized trauma is one. So the nice things about these trainings is they are, while we're going through these trainings and learning skills, they're also healing for ourselves, because as people of color, we're not immune from needing mental health support, experiencing the trauma that others, are experiencing. So there's also, we have to make sure that we are providing folks who are serving, providing them with the supports needed so that they can continue to serve. They can take care of their own mental health needs so that they can continue to thrive and serve at their full capacity.
And have you run into that issue, Kelly, yourself?
Personally?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, and it can be a difficult thing because as a professional, but in your head that you're not immune. But when you find yourself in a space of needing help, figuring out where do I get that help? What can that look like for me? It can be very challenging. So I do think we also need to be intentional, and that's part of what this initiative is as well. I was one of the first mental health providers on the scene, unfortunately, that day, and I saw a lot, and I was there for weeks, and it took months before I started. Because in order to serve, you have to kind of suppress and numb yourself so that you can be available to others. So this is, as a professional mental health clinician, this is what all of us were out there doing, trying to numb and focus on the need. However, we're not immune to what's happening. So months later, I had conversations with some who was just sharing, I'm having nightmares, I'm dreaming of what I saw, I can't sleep. I was finally able to, talk to my spouse, and it's like, yeah, me too. So I think that, being able to be in a space that normalizes that for the professionals and acknowledge that we also have to take care of ourselves so that we can continue to serve. It's important.
Let's continue with a little bit about your own history, both at Healing Hub and then, moving forward with Dumas Rise LLC.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, really, so the Healing Hub is a mental health nonprofit organization that really focuses on providing some direct services to our communities of color, providing workshops, doing community engagement. We're going to continue to do that great work. Some of the clinicians who are in the cohort are going to provide services under the Healing Hub through the work, like providing workshops and groups. With the Dumas Rise standing for Restoration in Sound Environments. We need restoration in sound, stable environments. It's going to really focus on providing those types of spaces for mental health, for people who are in the mental health field, not just people of color who are in the mental health field or who are looking to go into the mental health field. So really increasing the number of Black and brown clinicians, and then also making sure they have the supports that they need to continue serving. And in that, also recognizing that in our communities of color, our leaders of faith are oftentimes the first line of mental health support for many of us. So they also need to make sure they're getting what they need to continue providing support. So, whether it's a trained, licensed mental health professional, a peer trained a mental health professional, a faith leader, anyone who's providing mental health support. We want to make sure that that they have resources, that they have the visibility so the community knows where they are, how to find them, and we want to make sure we're adding to the pool of mental health professionals.
Building capacity.
Yes, that's right.
So in this program is obviously a great step. Healing Hub and then Dumas Rise LLC. What other steps need to be taken, do you think?
I think that we have to make sure that we don't. The name of this show is What's Next?
Yes, ma'am. But we're going to ask you what's next in a little bit, so don't go there yet.
I was going to say, we want to make sure we don't, I think as a society, we have a tendency to want to rush to, okay, what's next? Mm-hmm. And so I think that staying present in making sure we put the attention, the time, and resources into addressing the needs that have been brought to the forefront, and realizing that while it's been a year and a half going on 2 years, it's still so very raw for so many people, and we still have so much work to do, and we're not going to be able to do that without everyone coming into the space and
right.
to the table.
Let's not put the cart before the horse.
Right.
We've got these issues right here,
yes.
right now.
Yes.
Let's make sure all those bases are covered
yes.
before we even talk about moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Is it all up to institutions to take the lead on this? What can you do in your role, and where does community input come into play?
I wouldn't say it's all up to institutions. I think that all institutions need to recognize that they do play a role in changing the narrative, changing our present reality, and also taking responsibility and making sure they're not just doing things in a performative way, that they are really doing things, taking steps to transform and make true long-term impact changes. So I think all of it, everyone plays a role. And so institutions have to understand and make sure that community voice is present And it's not enough to just hold, maybe you have a meeting and you invite community in, but if you go back and just do what you do without actually incorporating any of those steps, that's not good. And yeah, so just not taking steps to look like I'm making change, but actually really doing the change.
Being intentional with your movements.
Absolutely.
So now the question is, what's next for Kelly Dumas in the Healing Hub of New York and Dumas Rise LLC?
Yes. So what's next is a continuation of, we need, at the end of the day, we need more clinicians. We'll never, I don't know that we'll ever have enough. If you look, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but we have overall, when you look at mental health clinicians, the number of Black and brown clinicians are very low compared to the need of people who need services. So we'll never have enough to serve everyone, but we need more. So what's next is we have to continue looking at how do we increase the number of mental health professionals that are out here able to serve, and how do we increase the community's awareness and ability to access those individuals. Also, as we continue to increase the number of Black and brown mental health professionals, we understand that they are going to find themselves more so than not working in spaces that are not designed for us. And so we have to make sure we are also equipping them and providing them with the supports that they need to be successful in wherever they find themselves, so that they can really fully serve and not burn out, and not feel like I have to leave the field because I'm being harmed and it's not healthy for me.
And that will do it for Producers Picks. We would like to thank our guests, Daniel Robertson, Kelly Dumas, and Amanda Paul. If you missed anything or you'd like to hear it again, you can get the program as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on the Amplify BTPM app. Each episode is online at WBFO.org. I'm Thomas O'Neill White. Thanks for listening.